Hey everyone, it's Carter. Welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the show where I talk to writers of all sorts of backgrounds and have a lovely and beautiful conversation with them. And at the end, we make up a short story together. I actually tried to record this introduction without locking my cat up. Normally I have to lock him up because he's such a pain in the ass. And I thought I'd give it a try, but he started screaming the second I hit record. And it's driving me crazy. This cat is driving me crazy. I don't know if he needs drugs. I don't know if I need drugs. I don't know what it is, but it's creating a high level of anxiety anytime I try to get anything done at this desk and he's not locked up. So if you have any tips, please let me know. He's a psychopathic Bengal. If that adds to your information to help give me some advice. Anyway, so today's episode is really cool. So today I talked to a USA Today bestselling author, Xio Axelrod, who I didn't know before, and she's very awesome. She has a great background. She grew up kind of in the recording industry, and her dad was a music producer, and he worked with acts like the Village People, and also a songwriter. And she kind of steered away from that and went to school for science and engineering, but was inevitably drawn back to the arts, and eventually became a writer, and a very successful one at that. And her latest book is The Girl with Stars in Her Eyes. And it's gotten a lot of acclaim. It was out fairly recently. So yeah, it was great talking to her. She's got a great personality. She made me laugh, which I always love. We made up a fantastic story, and it's just, one of those situations where you get to meet somebody, and then afterwards, like, I'm glad that person was in my life for a little bit. So I really enjoyed my conversation with her. I hope you do as well. This is me talking to Xio Axelrod.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to meet you as well. And thank you for the product placement behind you.
You like that?
I can see my book. I can see your book.
Wait, where am I? There you
are. Somebody's learned about book marketing.
Seriously, I've become like a book publicist during this whole thing. It's so funny.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, it's been really tough trying to navigate how to connect with people. And in some ways it's been easier, obviously, because you can talk to people that you normally wouldn't be able to. But on the other hand, people are just, they're burnt out on talking to people over video. Yeah. Which is what we're doing right now, but that's okay.
No, it's cool. It's all good.
So where are you?
Philadelphia.
Okay. I haven't been there in several years. I did the big Liberty Bell tour probably 5 years ago.
Okay.
Cool. So are you born and raised in Philly?
Yeah.
Okay. So Eagles fan, all that kind of stuff.
I'm more of a hockey person, but my father is a diehard Eagles fan. So
okay.
Yeah. We have
is my brother-in-law who grew up in kind of the shore area, but so I hear about
Jersey's kind of divided between the Eagles and the Giants.
Okay, that makes
literally
sense.
Like cross the state, like right in the middle. There's like a divide.
Right. So what was Philly like when you were a kid?
Ooh, rough.
Was it? What was the kind of the environment where you were? Were you in the city itself or?
Yeah. I lived in the city. Both of my parents were away. Like my dad was in the height of his career, so he was away a lot, and my mom was touring with Sister Sledge. So
wow.
They're like my cousins. So she was with them. My dad is a producer and songwriter and arranger and all this other stuff. So he was working, I think, like the Village People or whoever at the time.
Yeah.
And so I stayed with my grandmother. We were in a rough part of town, and I went to school in sort of an affluent part of town. So I got both things going on.
Well, you had that Village People money. Which is nothing to sneeze at. I'm sure the Village People and Sister Sledge money was. I mean, that was probably rolling in back then.
Yeah. They probably were. Yeah, they probably were. But it was Philly was it's always had this reputation of being like well, you've seen Rocky, I'm sure. It's like
I
that.
have, but I would like to not
Yeah.
just stereotype the entire city based on what's in Rocky.
Right, but that's what everyone I mean, I mean, that was pretty accurate, I think, at the time. That
Okay.
was what, the 70s and, like,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
80s
Late
when I grew up in
'70s. Yeah.
yeah, I grew up in the 80s, and it was like, yeah, blue collar, don't mess with us, like, working
Hmm.
class, like, hoagies and cheesesteaks, like, that was the whole thing, right?
Just kind of gritty.
Gritty and
Yeah.
yeah, like, the sports I mean, our sports teams weren't winning. I think the Phillies won the World Series at, like, once in,
Yeah.
like, all that time.
Yeah.
But, like, we were used to losing, and so the city had this, like, chip on its shoulder, and I think some of that is still there, but it's definitely gentrified,
Yeah. So
definitely.
you were like, because I was born in '70, so like, yeah, the '80s were very my music, your teenage years and your
Yeah.
music years, you were the same kind of decade in terms of,
Yeah. Well, it's weird because I was actually talking about this with someone the other day because music is, like, a big part of my persona and my
right.
writing and everything, and my father wrote for the Village People, but he wrote for the Spinners and the OJs, like, he has some big hits with them, and then, like,
Okay.
that whole Philly soul sound, the
Yeah.
whole, Philly International, and then there was Sister Sledge, and so I grew up listening to, it wasn't retro at the time, but it was, like, disco and R&B and soul, and
Right.
that's pretty much all I knew, and then around,
Okay.
like, my tweens, I discovered, like, classic rock, and I was
Right.
like, "Wait, what is this? Where did the
Right.
what
Well,
how did I not hear any of
which
this?"
was, I'm sure, also huge in Philly, right? Like that
Yeah.
whole kind
Yeah.
of Eastern Seaboard, and as you get into New England, is so classic rocky. That was my
Yeah.
kind of experience, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up, tailing along with my dad at sessions at the place called Sigma Sound, which was, like, the Motown
Okay.
studio of Philly. And, like, Elton John recorded there, Bowie recorded there, so, like,
Yeah.
that was that legacy on top of the whole soul thing,
Right.
but
Oh, interesting.
I just still didn't know anything about it until I was like, "Wait a minute, how come nobody ever told me about this stuff?" Like,
Right.
and I just went, "Meow." So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's so you get so influenced by just your bubble, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
and you sound like you had a obviously, and I want to get into that a little bit more, but a very
Sure.
specific bubble about the music that was around you. I
Yeah.
grew up in LA, and it was karaoke, it was all alternative rock, it was all new
Mhm.
wave, and
Mhm.
that's what I was fully into. I was a big Smiths fan, and then I went to school in upstate New York, and that was my exposure to classic rock. And I mean, even like the Beatles. It's not like I was unaware of the Beatles, but I never
Yeah.
really, and songs would play. I'm like, oh, this is nice. And people
Yes.
look at me like, what are you, an idiot? Of course,
Yeah.
but they didn't know Depeche Mode, but they but they
Right.
knew Zeppelin.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but so obviously you're heavily influenced by music. And I
Mhm.
noted that obviously on your website and everything too.
Yeah.
Um, your dad, you said he was a producer, but also a writer.
He wrote some big song well, his biggest song is "I'll Be Around,"
Oh,
"Whenever You Call Me," right. He calls the
wow.
song "Tuition," but the rest of the world
Right,
calls it "I'll Be
I
Around."
I hear it at the mall. There's another few
Dude,
cents for your college fund.
everywhere, like, we go through the supermarket, it's like, "Dad, your song's on there. Here you
That's
go."
so, yeah. That's such a
Yeah.
weird thing to me, like that idea of like that just kind of prevalence. Like it's
Yeah.
like when not that I've had a ton of experiences like this, but going to an airport and seeing your book in the bookstore, you're like, holy shit, that's my book.
I can
Like,
imagine. I haven't had that experience
you just
yet,
want to
but I
like
can
show it to
imagine.
people like this is me. Well, it's pretty
Yeah, right.
trust
How do
me.
you not do that? Like, "Hey,
Yeah,
this
you
is"
kind of do. You kind of do. Like, hey, do you want me to sign this for just for your stock?
right? And they look at you like,
Like, no,
no."
or they won't let us return it if it's a sign.
Oh, that's rough.
So, and so, yeah, do you have siblings?
Yeah, yeah, several.
So you're growing up and you're listening to a lot of music,
Mhm.
and are you starting to think that that's something that you might be into in terms of wanting to do,
Yeah.
as an adult?
Yeah, we all did, and my dad was like, "No, you don't wanna do this." And
Okay,
we
so
said,
there
"No, we
wasn't that
really
he was
do."
actually trying to keep you away from it.
Yeah, well, the business of music can be rough, and he went through some
Unlike
stuff
publishing, which is
some
smooth
stuff,
sailing.
but just smooth sailing, no comparison at all. So he really he got burned a couple of times, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't want you guys doing this." So he actively, like, fought against especially me. Like,
Huh.
I wanted to go to performing arts high school, he's like, "Nope." And I'm like, "Come on." He's like, "Nope. You're gonna
Huh.
study computers, and you're gonna do this, and you're gonna do that," and. So, yeah, there was some discouragement there.
Did he think that, getting burned a couple times, was that a function of what he saw as, endemic to the industry, or just like he just happened to connect with a couple people who weren't great.
No,
He
he thought it
thought it
was the
was
industry.
the whole
Yeah.
industry sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it sucks, but just like, he was like, you never know who to trust. And we're girl, I'm a girl.
yeah. Yeah.
And so he was like, yeah, no, this isn't for you.
So, and what was your reaction to that? I mean, did
I was very much a daddy's girl. So I was like,
uh-huh.
okay. So, I went to high school for engineering and science. And
Oh
then I
wow. All right. So
yeah,
you really went the other end of the
I went the
spectrum.
other one, but I still did. Like, I was in choir from like elementary school on. And it's funny that you mentioned the Beatles because we were singing Beatles songs in choir, but we didn't know
Yeah.
who the Beatles were. They were just like
Right.
choral
This is
arrangements.
catchy.
Yeah, this is catchy. But I always did like, the school plays. And so he was fine with that. But it was like, okay, I want to do this professionally. He's like, yeah, no.
And so, and what about your mom? So when you said she was touring with Sister Sledge, what was she doing?
She was like, so my dad sort of like discovered them.
Oh
They
wow.
were singing in church, and so I think
Sister
Kathy,
Sledge was a church band initially.
they were just girls in church, and
So amazing.
my mother was working with their mom. So I always knew their mother as Aunt Flo. Like I didn't even know until I was a teenager that we weren't like blood relations. So, but they're my cousins. As far as
Oh,
I'm
wow.
concerned, they're my cousins.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
like, so they were working together and, Flo was like, oh, I've got my girls. And so my dad, who was like, producer at Atlantic and all those other places, he was like, oh, I'll take a listen. And he really loved their sound. And I think Kathy, he told me once that she was like 13 or 14 years old at the time. So really young. And he's like, okay, we'll cut a single and whatever. But my mom was like one of their chaperones when they went on tour because they were so young. So my aunt and my mom would be on tour with them. And like I think she told me a story once where Duran Duran, they were in London and Duran were kind of like, sidling up to the girls and my mom and Flo were like, yeah, no, let's just stay on your side of the room. Let's stay over here. Like, no, nope,
stay away, Simon Le Bon.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Yeah.
Although that would be a great double billing, right? Sister Sledge and Duran Duran. I would totally go to
wish
that show.
Dude, I was a kid, but I was like, can I just go on one of the tours and stuff? And of course, they're not
yeah,
baby on tour, but yeah.
So you come from a very artistic family, right? And so I'm always, I love kind of people's origin story and just like, why, that's kind of the whole point of this interview series is like, why do you do what you do? Where did that come from? Because I just find it so interesting and everyone's got a story and it's there's so many things that like I expect and then I'm wrong. Like, so, so you have this very artistic family and you're kind of told to stay away from that side of the arts. But then you totally go to like science and engineering, which is, so you had a brain that was probably kind of a little bit well balanced, all encompassing. Like you had an aptitude, I assume, and an interest in engineering. So then you go there, and then what's that experience like?
So I went to a very good magnet school for elementary, junior high in Philly.
Okay.
So by the time I got to high school, I realized I had some experience with things that the other kids didn't.
Sure.
So high school wasn't the learning experience that I'd hoped it would be in that area. So I think that if I had...
So you took a step back. You're with the general population. And you're like, all right, they're not really getting challenged too much here.
Yeah, it was frustrating. And again, I was still doing the music and theater stuff. So I went to college when I was 17 and I decided I was going to be a theater major. And I didn't tell my parents. So yeah, I like quietly changed my whole like career path. And I was like, okay, well, he won't let me do music or he doesn't want me to do the music thing, but I could do the acting thing. Let's try that. And he, for some reason, like was really thrilled with that. Like thought that was cool. It was music specifically that he really didn't want us to.
Well, I mean, had he been a Hollywood producer, he probably would have shied you away from acting because he knows like how bad that is.
Yeah.
But so that's also interesting that you've had these different experiences and then you had a pretty definitive idea at a young age of like what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And knowing that, theater and acting is also a tremendous struggle. And not necessarily great odds. So, but you kind of forged ahead and then where did you go to study that?
I went to McDaniel College, which is a small liberal arts college in Maryland.
Okay.
And it was, they had a theater program and it was pretty robust for a school of that size, but not like well known or anything like that. wanted to go somewhere that was away from Philly, sort of a different environment. And it was
Yeah.
very rural country
Oh,
school,
okay.
and it was like very, very homogenous. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like,
As
yeah.
yeah, I can totally picture it. So but you kind of probably knew that going in, right? When you're
I
applying,
did and I
you're looking
didn't.
at their demographics
I
and
was
stuff, or
a little bit, yeah. I
yeah.
was I was a little naive. I was 16 or so when I, started looking at 15 or 16 when I started looking at colleges.
Small
And I
is
was
like
just
just
kind
a
of
few
like,
thousand people, I assume, like 2, 3,
yeah,
4,000.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and like, there was Temple University here and Drexel and UPenn, and they were all like, recruiting for my school. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to stay in Philly. Like, I
Yeah.
haven't been anywhere else, like lived anywhere else.
Yeah.
So, for better or worse, I went down there and dealt with some interesting things. Yeah. Carroll County, Maryland was an interesting place.
Yeah. So yeah, a little flavor of the South.
Yeah,
uh,
I was definitely below the Mason-Dixon line.
so how did that form, like, how you looked at people, looked at life, looked at theater? Did you
Um,
go through, it was a 4-year program?
yeah, it was like well, at first, when I first started auditioning for things, I was getting, typecast as, the singing maid or the
Oh,
whatever. It was
really?
like that kind of a thing.
Huh.
And I really I had always done like musicals in like elementary school, junior high, and high school, but then I realized that I didn't want to do just that thing, that they looked at me and said, "Okay, this is this
Right.
person who's done," So I switched to like classical theater. So it's like Shakespeare and Euripides and all this stuff.
Sure.
And I was like, and so I was going out for those roles, and they would kind of look at me like, you really want to do this? We have this great production of West Side Story coming up. You'd be great for the comic relief in that. Or we have this great production, and I was like, yeah, no. So
No,
that was,
Euripides, goddammit. I need a depressing
yeah,
play
right.
without a lot of singing.
Eventually, I did win over the head of the department, and he started giving me some meaty roles in like
Okay.
summer stock stuff. But it took a minute to wear him down.
Yeah. And it's like, why should I have to wear you down? Why,
Yeah, well,
why is that a thing that has to even
again, Carroll
happen?
County, Maryland. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, yeah. But the
And
whole thing was I'm glad I did it. I didn't
yeah.
end up doing acting as a professional career. I tried for like a year after school. Actually went to London. I moved to London for a bit, thinking, okay, Americans don't appreciate me. I'll come over here to the UK where they
Not that you
appreciate.
gave it a ton of time, but
Yeah, no, you know how you are in your early 20s. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna come over here. And they were like, American.
yeah.
No.
But maybe that wasn't, really like on a subconscious level, your passion.
Yeah, no. I mean, I still did music while I was there. So it
Yeah.
was,
And clearly you have singing chops, and you've got a lot of talent along the musical line. So I can see that being a little bit frustrating. Like, well, I want to,
yeah.
I want to use these talents that I have
I wanted to
naturally,
use them. And I eventually, by the time I moved back to stage, which was, a year or so later, I was like, okay, this theater thing is not going to work out. Let me see what I can do in the meantime. And I worked at a couple of theaters and like the behind the scenes stuff, like, helping them with subscriptions and like audience stuff and all that stuff. And I was like, well, I'll just do some music stuff while I'm waiting, like while I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I like, had a little coffee shop duo for a while,
Okay.
and I kept trying to put a band together. But again, I ran into that I was a rock girl. And when I would, you know, answer someone's ad saying, looking for a vocalist, I'm like, okay, cool, guitarist looking for a vocalist. And they were like, no, I don't want to do soul or reggae or jazz or blues or whatever it is that you do. And I was
Yeah.
like,
That's not what I do.
That's not what I do. So it was really, really hard to put together a
Huh.
band.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And that was in London.
No, that was back in Philly.
Oh, that was back in Philly.
Yeah,
Okay.
when I came back to Philly, yeah.
And then, throughout this entire span from kindergarten,
Give me my entire life story here.
entire life story. Yeah. This is what I do at cocktail parties. I meet somebody. I'm like, I don't want to small talk. I want to know everything about you. I want to pick out the things that I find super interesting and really drill into those.
Cool.
Throughout that entire span, as you're kind of covering these different parts of your brain,
Yeah.
are you reading a lot of books? Are you interested in writing? Are you interested in the concept of storytelling? Was there even a seed there at that time?
I read a lot. I read a lot of fantasy. I was a huge Anne Rice fan.
Oh,
growing up.
yeah.
I read a
I
lot of
just
Anne
got
Rice.
her to sign a book like a couple of years ago, and I was very excited.
Yeah.
The full Vampire Chronicles.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I devoured those books when I discovered, and then I went back to her other stuff and, like, read
yeah.
stuff that I shouldn't have read at a young age, but I
Most
was
of
like,
her
"Oh, I'm
stuff
gonna
you
read
probably
that."
shouldn't have been reading.
Yeah, but, like, I don't know if you've read the Beauty trilogy, which is, I mean,
No, but
she's like the 4th book in.
I know of it.
Yeah,
I've heard it's like
it's intense.
it's pretty racy.
I was, like, reading it and didn't even know what I was reading, at
Right.
15 or whatever, but she was huge, and then, I was, like, that goth girl, in case you
Okay.
haven't figured that out. So I was reading, like, Edgar Allan Poe, and then
Sure.
I would read, like, Edward Albee plays, and, like, I was just
Yeah.
odd,
I've got a raven tattoo that
Do
says
you?
Nevermore. Yeah,
Oh,
I was always a big
we
fan.
are see, this was meant to be. Um, so yeah, that was that, and I guess, my dad being a songwriter, I wanted to write songs, so I was dabbling in poetry and lyrics and things like that, and, he's a storyteller through his songs, so that's how I saw storytelling, was in these short little, like, snippets. I didn't really think of long form prose until I
Right.
started writing fan fiction, believe it or not. I
So how
wrote
does that begin?
fanfic.
'Cause I'm always curious about fan fiction because I don't know
Yeah,
if I really
get it?
understand it
Yeah.
just because I haven't been exposed to it a whole lot. So tell me about that.
So I didn't even know it was a thing until I
Yeah.
wrote some. I had the flu.
That's how all good stories start.
It's all good stories start. I had the flu and I was sitting on the couch and they had like a Buffy marathon on some
Uh-huh.
channel. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this show. Like, because, vampires were Anne Rice. It was Lestat and Louis and all those guys, not
Right.
whatever that was. So, but it was on and I watched like a couple of episodes and I was like, okay, this isn't too sucky. And then they got to an episode, and I was invested in the characters by that point.
Sure.
This was like a couple days later, and I was like, "Man, why didn't this happen? This should have happened." So I just like opened up my laptop and just started like rewriting that scene for some reason. I don't even know why. I
Oh,
was
isn't
just
that
compelled to
interesting?
do it,
Yeah.
and so I did that. And afterwards, I went online and did a search for like stuff about the show, and I
Yeah.
popped up on LiveJournal, and there was a whole community on LiveJournal of like Buffy fans who were writing stories and all this stuff. And I was like, wait, this is a thing. So I like fell into that crowd and that
Huh.
was it. That was the end.
So how old were you at the time when you
I
started doing that?
was, I'm trying to think. This was like, I must have been about 30.
Okay.
So I was like, not the demographic for the show. And I was like, yeah,
That show has huge legs. Like it has I
it
think actually
does.
it's on our list, like for me and the kids to my kids are 17 and 15. And, I've never seen it, but I always hear it's tremendous. And I want to go back and start watching it with him. And I think we would all love it.
Yeah, I didn't see like I didn't it was like toward the end of the run where this episodes were. So I had missed like all the mythology ahead of it, you know? So I had to go back
Oh,
and catch up.
because you couldn't stream it. I guess you could have
Yeah,
DVDs at the time, but
yeah,
wow. So you got into the show not even having seen the first
yeah,
few seasons.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was just it was just yeah. And so I like, when I get into something, I really get into it. I like get obsessed over things, and I just found all the backstory, learned about the actors, the production company, like everything, because everybody that was into it, they had all this like background information about all, they're shooting this scene and this is what happened and this was an
Right.
outtake that something, like kind of thing. So yeah, it was fun.
So you with this piece of fan fiction, you write it and you find out that it's a thing and other people have similar things.
Yeah.
Do you start reading theirs and like, oh, theirs sucks, mine's better than this? Or do you post yours? And what's that moment like when you
I
first
think I
share some of your writing with strangers?
Yeah, I remember sharing it on LiveJournal because I had a few followers for some reason. Like I picked up a couple of followers in the beginning and just from like chatting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Actually it was Yahoo that I landed on first. It was a Yahoo group. And this girl said, "Hey, there's this thing called LiveJournal. Here's a code. Go
Okay.
start a blog and then you can follow these people and you can follow me." And so I was like, "Oh, I have this little thing I wrote." And she like reblogged it, I guess. And so I had a little bit of a following and I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is fun. And this is something fun to do for a
Yeah.
while. I had no idea that it was gonna like take me on this strange,
So you weren't
long adventure.
necessarily looking at that and analyzing your writing and analyzing your
No,
structure. You're just like, I
no.
wish the scene would have kind of gone this way.
Yeah. But when you are a storyteller, doesn't matter what your medium is, you're
Yeah.
always writing in your head.
Right. Are you, or is
So
that how you are? Do you feel like
yeah.
you're always like, oh, okay,
Oh,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So, original characters started to pop up for me. I was like, "Oh, if I had written this episode, I would have had a character that did something like this, or would have made this character this way and not the way that
Huh.
they wrote him, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when I started to write the longer pieces, which was like, I didn't even know I was capable of writing 50,000 words,
Right.
it was
Right.
like original story, original characters. I would do like entire episodes that had nothing to do with what they had done and stuff. And I was like, oh, it was still though, just something to do, something creative to get like,
Right. You're not
you know,
saying like, what's the revenue stream
right,
potential if I
right,
if I do
right,
this,
right.
but you're learning, right? You're
I
learning
was learning,
how to write.
I was learning how to write, and I was learning what other people respond to,
Right. Well, you know who the audience is at that
you
point,
know who the
right?
audience is. And
Very
it was,
specifically.
I'm also, I guess I'm like a natural born marketer because I'm always looking at like demographics and like what appeals to what demographic. And so it was interesting for me for that show in particular, which was geared towards teen girls, right?
Yeah.
And then you had like the queer community, you had like geeks, you had dudes, you had, it was like all these different demographics that were glomming onto the show. And I was like, what is it about this show that crosses so many different, the strata? So it was like, that was the other part of my brain working,
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it's always the common denominator with that is the show it has to be good.
yeah,
However you define good.
yeah, yeah.
It can't just be, well, they happen to have a queer character, so
Right,
therefore
right, right.
they're going to be popular. So, I mean, Schitt's Creek, I think, is a good example of that too.
Yes.
In its essence, it's just a good show.
Yeah.
So how does that parlay itself into, maybe I should start writing books and seeing what that's all about?
Well, there were quite a few Buffy fanfic authors. We had a we had a convention
Of
in Las
course you did.
Vegas. We did.
That probably was amazing.
There were 300 fanfic authors there, and Jane Espenson was our keynote speaker.
And you probably knew a lot of these people online, at least.
Online.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That must have been such a trip.
It was a trip. I mean, I was used to meeting people at like concerts and things like that,
Yeah.
but like to meet people who were all into this, it was my first foray into fandom.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Right. So that was interesting. But just the craft that went into what these people were doing, because I was just having fun. Some of these people were like on the path to publication.
Yeah.
And so a lot of Buffy authors made that transition early. Like they were writing for like small press, like Allure's Cave and stuff like that. And so they took their original fanfic, changed the names, and 50 Shades of Grey, like, that was Twilight fanfic.
Yeah.
So they did that. And I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. Still not thinking I could do that too. But it was like, oh, it's cool to see them do that, and cheering them on.
And I mean, I know there's a market for it, but at the time where, these people who were making these decisions like, oh, yeah, this is selling really well. There's money to be made here. I mean, I don't know.
I think initially they were, I mean, up until probably 50 Shades and maybe a little after that, people really didn't take fanfic seriously.
Yeah.
In terms of like, I was like, so I don't think that
Harry Potter spawned a lot of fanfic as well.
There were a lot of people who, when Buffy fizzled out, people switched over to Harry Potter, and then when that fizzled out, they switched over to Twilight. So it was like, there's some thread through there.
Right.
But it was interesting to watch those authors, go from fanfic to being paid for their work. And I was like, that's really cool. So I thought, I could maybe write a book. So I started dabbling with a project that's still sitting in my drawer.
Okay.
But I was deep into the music then. I was still recording, I was still touring. And so like, I didn't really think, okay, this is a thing that I'm going to do now. So it wasn't until I think it was 2013, there was like a small dip in the economy in the UK, which is where I really based myself when I'm in Europe. That was enough to sort of curtail their booking, the places I was booking, from booking international artists. And so I couldn't book my spring tour. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm staying home. And again, just started writing while I was home.
Okay. And then what did that turn into?
So
I know what it eventually turned into, but
so by then I was on Tumblr.
Okay. Oh, I remember Tumblr. Is that still around?
It's still around, but I think Yahoo bought them and cleaned it all up,
Yeah.
Like you can't even put like a book cover with like a shirtless guy on it anymore.
Oh,
it's like porn now. Like this. But 2013, anything went. And and I started writing. I was sort of hanging out on the edge of another fandom. I wasn't too into the show, but I loved the fandom. They were really passionate.
What show is that?
The show's called Scandal. It was on
Oh yeah, I
ABC.
remember
Yeah,
Scout,
Sean.
of
Yeah,
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
their fandom was, whew, they were fun. But
Huh.
so I started writing sort of like a sort of a tangential piece. I wrote like a 2,000 word short story and just posted it on my blog from like 30 people that followed me, and they were like, more. So I
Huh.
wrote a little more, and they were like, more. And then 200,000 words later,
Jesus.
because I wrote it while I was on tour, like in the middle of the night and stuff like that. And then one day I was on Twitter, and a friend of mine in Houston was like, "Oh my gosh," talking to someone else. "Did you see the latest chapter? Blah, blah, blah. It was so good." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "It's this book that this woman is writing, and she posts like 3 chapters a week." And I was like, "That's mine." She's like,
That's
"No."
so weird.
Right? It was so weird. So I sent her the next
Yeah.
chapter, and she was like, "Oh my God, you have no idea how many people are reading this." And I was like, "No, I really don't know how many people are reading this." So that was an eye opener.
Huh. Isn't that interesting? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like grassrooting your whole fandom yourself
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
and not relying on a publisher at that point.
No, I had no plans to publish at all. And it wasn't until a friend of mine, actually, her book just came out last week, Denny S. Bryce.
Okay.
She was in the Buffy fan and we met there. And she had said, "Okay, I'm going to publish. I'm going to go for a professional, trad deal." And so she went in that direction. And I was like, "Yeah, cool for you." And then so when this happened, she was like, "Okay, you need to like publish this. You need to figure out how to like turn this into a saleable book. Like we need to. And I was like,
Or multiple books if you have that many words.
yeah, yeah, yeah."
That's
So
a
I
big
was like,
word count.
yeah. So she took me to a convention, or we went to a convention in Atlanta. It was Romance Writers of America, and I knew nothing. I had never read a romance. I didn't know anything about the genre, the subgenres. I knew nothing about publishing. I knew
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
about,
We have a similar background like that. We just kind of got
so
into it late and
I
had no
was
clue.
completely green. Yeah. And, and she's like, "Okay, have fun." And she like went off and did her thing. And I was like,
What do I
deer
do?
headlights when I had business cards. People are like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I write books." Like I knew nothing,
Yeah.
but it was eye opening and I learned a lot. So I spent like the next year sort of learning the publishing industry and
Yeah.
trying to figure out what to do with this this huge thing I had, which was really just serialized fiction, you know, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I decided to write another book, and then I self-pubbed that
Okay.
just to see if I could. And that book was reviewed in USA Today and did
Oh,
pretty well. And I was like,
which
"Oh,
is very, very rare
yeah." It
for
was on their,
self-pub.
it was on their Happily Ever After, which was like their romance
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But still, I was like, "What? Oh, okay." Because all the networking I had done over the year, their authors and people that I met were like, "Oh my God, Zio's got a book." And I was like, "Wait, wait, wait. I'm just
I do.
practicing. It's a practice book." And
Yeah.
so
Well, that's a scary thing, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
I had my first 3 books didn't sell. So as frustrating as that can be, it's also like those were my practice books,
yeah,
and kind of
yeah,
thank God,
yeah.
because I'd be
Yeah, I'm
scared to
afraid
go
to go
back
back
and
and
look at them.
yeah, I'm afraid to
Um,
go back and read this book. But I mean, people liked it and they still like it, and it was cool. And this was like, 5, 6 years ago.
yeah. And so
So
since then, you've been kind of this production machine.
I was an indie or I am an indie musician. And so I became an indie author,
Yeah.
like a self-pub author. That was just a thing. And I had friends who were like, "Unless I get a trad deal, I'm not going to publish." I'm like, that's your path. That's awesome. For me, I'm a control freak. So I wanted, I do my covers, I do my marketing,
Oh,
I do my,
wow.
all that
Okay.
stuff. So I was like, I'd never even worked with an editor before I got my trad deal. It was
Okay.
all self-contained. So that was like, a conscious decision I made to talk to a publisher when, because they every once in a while they would go, "Hey, what you working on? I like your
Yeah.
voice," or whatever. And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know about that." So
But
just kind of,
was that helpful? I mean, it's helpful in a number of ways, obviously, partnering
mm,
with somebody who's in the business of selling books,
yeah, yeah.
which no matter what, as an author, they're always going to know more than us
Oh
about
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But was that also helpful for you to kind of experience letting go a little bit? It
Oh
was,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because that can be good, right? To be like,
absolutely.
it's in your hands or God's hands or not my hands. That's all I know at this
Yeah,
point.
I think it's about finding the right partner. Like, I've been in the business now for 6 years. I've heard all the horror stories,
Yeah.
and like every publisher, doesn't matter how much you love them, every publisher has horror stories about
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So like, even when my deal was announced, I got a lot of like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy for you." And a few like, I don't know." And I was like, "Oh, wait." So, because when you
Yeah.
get
You
the
cling on
news,
to that
you
one
cling
or two
on to it,
books.
right? So
Yeah.
I'm like, well, but they are, you're with Sourcebook, so
Yeah.
they're
Oh,
just
yeah.
like, it's amazing. Like, there's an amazing team, and I'm really happy that I made the decision to partner with them, because it feels like a partnership. It doesn't feel like,
Yeah. I mean, I have 3 books out, or you and I have a joint, the same day, launch day coming
is it
up.
the same day? I
Uh,
knew it was the same month. Is it the
The
same day?
4th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yay.
Always a Tuesday, and there's some science behind that, but
Yeah, yeah.
and then my 4th and 5th books I signed with them coming out later.
I just saw the announcement. Congratulations.
No, thanks. Yeah, but I'm not going to spend time here, but I could praise Sourcebooks
Yeah.
and I've been with several publishers, so and they've all been great in their own ways, but Sourcebooks is really solid. But it's also, that's the other part of all of this, right? It's also tremendously helpful, and it sounds like you have this good advantage here to understand the marketing and PR side and how to connect with the people who want to read you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't. And if I think, if you go out there as an author and you just assume your publisher is just going to like take care of making sure
Do
people read
everything.
your book, you're
Yeah.
kind of screwed.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you can fix everything, but I always go out and hire a third-party PR firm for every book that
Mhm.
then works with Sourcebooks, who does a great amount of PR already,
Yeah.
especially compared to a lot of publishers. But
Yeah.
I just want to give my books every opportunity that they have to get exposure. And that doesn't mean they're going to do well or not, but at least you're giving them the fighting chance, So it sounds like you have kind of an eye and an ear for that.
Yeah, and I haven't, again, even though 6 years in, I still feel very green about the whole
Yeah.
process, because
Oh,
it's
you
so
should. 6 years is
new.
nothing.
It's nothing, but like, I've released several books on my
Mhm.
own, but it's still, this feels like complete, like I'm totally new all over again. Like, I'm doing things with them, talking to certain people that I've never even knew that existed. Like, what acronym are you telling me to speak to today? Like
Right.
that kind of a thing.
Right.
So, but it's also wonderful. And so I'm still trying to figure out how to partner with them on the marketing side. Like,
Yeah.
there are things that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And they were like, wait a second. Let's make sure we're on the same page. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, you can't. So like with this book that's coming out, like I'm doing music with it, and they're like, okay, we have to be careful when you release the music and how you
Yeah.
release the music, and stuff. I'm just
But
like, let's go.
But that being said, my experience has been they meaning publishers in general appreciate any kind of creative input at
Oh
all.
yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I've come up with ideas. I'm like, I want to do this. Will you pay for it? And they'll be okay.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's a great idea. So I mean, I think they always appreciate any kind of creativity that
Oh
helps
yeah.
kind of get the book in
Yeah.
the spectrum a little bit.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, that's like super exciting. So what's your experience been like, being somebody who's a control freak? Like, hey, Xio, here's your cover.
Oh yeah.
Has that been? I mean, first of all, your covers with source books are great. Like
Yeah.
they're very compelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, and it's not like you don't have any input, but yeah, it is kind of like, this is where we're leaning. Have you
Yeah.
been able to just kind of be cool with all that?
Yeah. I think they gave me, I think it was like 8 covers initially. They
Yeah.
were like, this is the directions that we're thinking. And I was like, okay, a couple of these are cool. The rest of them really don't think that, like, please
Right.
don't pick one of those. Like, oh my
Right.
goodness. But I think what they landed on, and the look and feel for the series, is just brilliant. It's
Yeah.
really eye-catching. The feedback, even from people who didn't know, well, a lot of people don't know who I am. So they're like, oh, what is that cover? Like, what is that? What's the story behind that cover?
Right.
And that's what I want. Like, I want,
Right.
something that will stand out a little bit.
Well, and they're thinking about things that you might not be like, what does this look like on a 3-inch screen?
Yes.
Which most people will be looking at it.
It's like that
the
little thumbnail on Amazon,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So, and they will put it's moved beyond just like, this is kind of what we think looks cool. This is what tested well.
Yes.
And this,
Yes.
and this is what the market for this type of book is leaning towards these days. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue with that. Like, what do I
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And then in terms of, getting your first editorial notes, what was that experience like for you?
Well, I had the experience of switching editors in the middle of the whole
Oh, you
thing.
got orphaned.
So, yeah, I got orphaned because my editor went to another house,
Yeah, it's very common.
and, it was right at the end of the first round of revisions. So I
Okay.
basically had to start over from scratch with my new editor.
But had you made your old editors changes?
No.
Okay. You hadn't made those at least. At
I
least you
hadn't
hadn't
made
gone.
them. Yeah, so it was like, "Okay," and I was like, "Well, which version do you want?"
Right. That's
And
so
she
weird.
was like, "Give me the book you want me to read." So I was like, "Okay." So, I
Oh,
just yeah. I was very, very lucky.
you're like,
And I
that's what
think,
I did initially.
yeah, you're right. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was, I loved my old editor, but I think, I hit the jackpot working with Mary. So,
Yeah. Oh, that's
yeah.
fantastic. And
Yeah.
it is like, you know, and I've discussed this with several guests when you get those editorial notes. Like I'm always, it's always a little bit like, I'm going to double click on this now and see
Yeah, it
what hell
did with my
awaits me.
eyes closed. Yeah.
But I'm always just grateful, man. Like it's just like, oh, yes, this totally makes the book better. And it's going to be a pain in the ass. It's going to take me a month to do this,
Yeah.
but thank you for this. And there's very few things that I ever disagree with. And if they are, they're usually very minor stuff. So
Yeah.
if you can kind of jettison your ego a little bit and just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
these are really valid comments, then it just makes you a better writer. So I've
Oh,
always been
absolutely.
thankful for editorial notes. So
Yeah, it was my first experience, and, it was a learning curve, like a
yeah,
huge learning curve for me. But I was really worried because I didn't know Mary. I've never met Mary in person. We didn't
yeah,
know each other.
right,
And I was like, is she going to get what I'm trying to do here? Because my book kind of straddles a line. And I was
right.
like,
A
but
line
she got
between
it
what?
between romance and like friendship fiction. And I don't know, like it's not, it's romance, but it's not, I think a lot of I've had a couple of comments from readers saying, I love the book, it's very romantic, but it's not like that strong romance,
Right.
you
It's
know.
not the typical expectation of a romance novel.
Right. And you
Yeah,
get what you expect from a romance, but like a lot of the story is about Tony and her falling in love not only with the dude, but with like the band and with the
yeah,
industry and with herself. So there's a
right,
lot of like that in there. So
right.
and I was like, oh, are they gonna want me to like focus more on Tony and Seb, because this is
Yeah,
a romance? But there was enough in there. I think that romance lovers will love it, but there's a lot more for people who don't necessarily read romance too. So
right. So
I was like,
where are you headed now? Like you're, just kind of as the years go on, are you still heavily involved with recording as well, or is it now, this is really my focus for now is writing?
I think I got really tired of touring anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I can
But no,
imagine.
the focus is definitely on the writing, but I've found a way to do both with this series in particular. Like this was like one of those things where I was like, okay, I can be the band, like in some,
Yeah.
recording music for the series and, creating this like universe with like the band and their music and their social media presence and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And I was like, I can still experience the things I love about music and also do this, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I've kind of married the two things, I think, in a
That's
way
so
that's going to
cool.
work for me.
That's so cool. Well, listen, we're going to do a little quick storytelling.
Sure.
And how it's going to work, I'm going to pick a book from behind me, and then you're going to pick a page and a
Okay.
sentence.
All right.
You nervous? It can be a
Oh
little.
my God. Now it should be fun. Let's do it.
It's well. What's great about it is it's usually it goes all over the place,
Mhm.
and it's always fun, and we can take as much time as we want. The whole thing maybe 3-4 minutes, but I'll pick a sentence and then I'll read that sentence, and then you give me one or
Give
two
you a
sentences.
sentence.
I'll give you one or two, and we can do whatever we want. So
Okay.
I don't have any romance books, but
That's
I will pick a book. I'll be right back. I don't remember when I read this, but this is America by Ethan Canin. All right, so give me a number between 1 and 450.
Let's go with 113.
Okay, and then give me a sentence, no, like a number between like say 1 and 4.
3.
Okay, it's a little involved.
Of course it is.
Got a couple character names in here. So I'll read it. Okay, here we go. And as an assistant in that house, I felt the urge to take a stand myself, to go fetch Clara, because that's what Liam Mettery would have done if he had been there.
Because Liam had a strong opinion about everything, and if he didn't get his way, there would be hell to pay.
But I didn't take a stand because I didn't think it was my place. And I still wonder to this day if by doing nothing, I was the cause for Perry's death.
It's a thought that haunted me every day since that fateful afternoon. But I had to get over myself. I had work to do.
I knew the moment I did nothing, it was time to quit and to leave forever. That afternoon, I packed my bags and I slipped out without anyone noticing me.
Or so I thought. Because when I ran into Liam, he looked at me as if I'd kicked his puppy. How could you do this? How could you just walk away like that?
It was that moment I realized Liam was the problem after all, that Liam had been playing me the entire time, and that secretly, I think he wanted me to leave. It was then that I knew he was really responsible for what happened to Perry, and I knew I had to do something about Liam.
How did you find me? I asked him, and he gave me that low chuckle that used to make me squirm and now just made my skin run cold. How do you think? He said.
And I realized it didn't matter. All that mattered was I knew how he viewed me, which was someone who was weak and incapable of action. But I knew I could use that to my advantage.
Ooh. I want to read this book. Oh, let me think. I know the kind of person you are, he said. Really? I responded, dipping my hand into my pocket. I clicked the button. I knew which one. I had used it before in lectures. Recording, I hoped, his entire confession.
I think we call it there.
Yeah.
I think that's great. That's great. So the difference between a romance author and a thriller author is, you know, when I heard her going for her pocket, I'm like, oh, she's got a knife there. You took the gentler approach.
I took the gentler approach. I thought about pulling out a gun, but I was like, nah, that's too obvious. Let me just secretly record this conversation.
Oh, see, so just so you were very quick there. Like I'm because I'm doing it every time, so I'm always curious to see what the energy and the reciprocity is like between the two people, and you were very quick. Sometimes it's just like sitting there for a long time.
Right.
Talk to my producer. I'm like, hey, can you edit out all those like long pauses?
Told you, it's always going in the back of my head. There's always a story or something running.
That's great. I don't ever think about my stories until I sit down for my hour a day or so and I write, and it's complete. Almost always it's out of my head. Otherwise. So I kind of wish I had what you had in terms of thinking of it. I'd probably be able to think of ideas a little bit faster.
But you're probably a plotter. Are you? Do you like?
I don't. I'm a complete pantser.
Are you really?
That's how I started writing, because I didn't start writing to my early 30s. But you know, so with almost all my books, I just think of an opening scene with people who I don't know who they are and doing things I don't understand. But it's just a scene that's interesting to me, and I spend the rest of the book trying to figure out what that scene means. So that's the thing. So when I sit down to write, it's my ability to escape into a world that I don't quite fully understand, but I get to discover. So it's exciting for me. So I don't think about it during the day. I just sit and look at the page. I'm like, then what? Or what if?
Yeah.
And then things start happening. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And sometimes it's a train wreck and you got to rewrite all of it. But it's that's the joyful part of writing to me, is the discovery of it all, rather than, you know, I know how this is going to end and I'm just kind of going through the motions. I kind of wish I could do that, but I just can't. So
yeah.
Interesting. Well, what a pleasure to talk to you, Xio. I had fun hearing about your journey and all your different abilities and talents, and a little bit about your life story. So it was truly great to hear from you, and I'm excited for your book to come out in just a few weeks. Oh, I think you froze up.
Yeah, we'll have to celebrate together.
Yeah,
Oh, did I?
You're good. There
My
will be
bad.
hopefully a Sourcebook's event at some point in the future, and we'll get to share
Yeah.
hugs in person.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Thanks for
You
having
as
me.
well. Take care. Have a great weekend.
You too. See
All
you.
right. Bye. So that was my conversation with Xio, which was great. She was great. She's got a fantastic energy about her. And I love the fact that in our story, she used the line, kicked his puppy. That's the first time those words have been uttered in a making it up impromptu storytelling event. So if you want to know more about Xio, you can go to xioaxelrod.com, and Xio is spelled XIO, and then Axelrod is AXELROD.com. You can find out all about her books there, all about her audio books, her music recordings, all sorts of stuff. And if you want to find out more about me, just go to carterwilson.com. You can see my musings, things that I write about, stuff about my books, my photography, and of course, subscribe to my newsletter, which I work very hard on. So treat yourself. Treat yourself to something nice. It's free. It's a newsletter once a month. That's it. I think you'll be happy that you did. So that's it for me. That's it for this episode of Making It Up. More episodes out soon. In the meantime, thank you. Take care.